Well, everyone, I have here Aviva Gordon with Gordon Law, and I want to take a few moments just to give you a little bit of information about who she is and about the services she offers, and then also give you some tips and suggestions and things to be keep in mind if you own investment property and you have an estate and you need estate planning needs. And as an investor, of course, you're also in small business for yourself. So lots of tips that I'm sure she can give you. So Aviva, just to start off, tell us about yourself. I mean, kind of what got you into law and then what brought you into this part of law, business law and helping with estate planning and things like that.
Well, so the truth is I went into law because I wasn't qualified to do anything else. Um, Seriously, I went into law school over 30 years ago and graduated law school in 1994. And started practicing here. And really my skill set has been in working with business owners and operators, and really sort of holistically. So there are some clients that I've been with from the commencement of their business. So I help people with starting businesses, formation, as well as, startup aspects of it. I do transactional work. So any sort of contractual or business arrangement documentation, and commercial litigation, which hopefully we try to keep people out of, but it is a thing, and outside general counsel, really to find myself somewhat entrenched in the business itself to ensure that risks are mitigated and opportunities are maximized. And probably about 5 or 6 years ago, as I started working with clients on some of their own strategic planning and exit planning from their businesses, I recognized the somewhat unique needs of a business owner in an estate planning context. If you've got the owner operator who either becomes disabled or ultimately passes, there are issues with respect to continuation of the business, not only for the sake of the business, but continuation of income stream or methodologies to protect the family in that family-owned business as well.
So that kind of segues perfectly into the next question. So as people are kind of organizing their business and having a business plan, things like that, what are some things that they need to consider in their estate plan as a small business owner, as opposed to someone that's maybe a W-2 wage earner, things like that?
So I think in lots of ways, it depends upon the nature of the business, right? Whether you are a sole proprietor, a corporation, or an LLC, and there are different sort of paths that you can and should take with those. But, particularly for if a family is reliant upon the revenue from that business, within the business itself, some succession planning, and with respect to the sort of personal estate, under any circumstance, I can't strongly enough recommend having a trust for pretty much everybody, but in the context of a business owner, whereby the trust, assuming that it's permissible under organizational documents, whereby the trust itself is the owner of either the membership interests of an LLC or the shares of a corporation, such that those interests do not have to go through probate, and that there is not a pause or hiccup or challenge with respect to the operation of the business because of the passing of one or the business owner.
So you mentioned, interest in the business, things like that. What about specifically for investment property owner? And you talked about the succession plan. What are some things that they should really consider when they have investment property in terms of organizing their trust and how to make that work so that it's a smooth transition? They don't get tied up into probate.
Sure. So if I can take sort of a step backwards with that, and that is if you have investment property, it really should not be owned in an individual's name under any circumstance. That is particularly true if you have multiple investment properties. Part of the reason of having investment properties, of course, is to diversify one's portfolio, perhaps have an income stream, perhaps have additional sort of capital assets. What you don't want to do is have liability spread from one asset to the other, or certainly to other sort of personal assets that are not necessarily the investment property. So typically what I advise for people to do with investment property is that they hold investment property in an LLC. It can be a single purpose, single asset LLC. So there's not a whole lot of magic to that or a whole lot of additional work associated with it, but it can silo off the liability associated with that particular investment property to other investments or assets owned by the ultimate owner of that. And as that folds into estate planning, typically what I will recommend to a client is that the ownership interest in the LLC be in the name of a trust. This is for a couple of reasons. One is still that limitation and that siloing. The second is at that point, upon the passing of the individual owner, right? You've got the LLC that survives that, and you also have the trust that survives that. Within the trust, who will have named a trustee who will be able to manage that property through the LLC. And to the extent that that property, upon the passing of the individual, needs to be sold, needs to go through a 1031 exchange, needs to be, if it's income producing, needs to be rented, needs, improvements, whatever it is that is needed. It provides sort of that seamless transition where you don't have the necessity of going through probate, where you don't have questions for the survivors of, who do we go to? What do we do? How do we manage this property? And quite frankly, at that juncture, you don't have to communicate with lawyers or judges when you should be spending your time, effort, and energy and dealing with the sort of internal feelings associated with the loss.
Very good. So I know you have lots of experience working with all kinds of business owners, obviously with me doing property management. Wanted to get your take on some common pitfalls or potential liability issues when it comes to being an investment property owner, or how you set up your business structure and things like that. Any juicy tidbits you can give us?
Well, have everything in writing, right? I mean, so in other words, make sure that you have a duly created LLC, that you maintain separate books and records for that LLC or those LLCs, that you have a duly created trust, that creation of the trust in and of itself is not enough. You have to actually fund the trust. You have to actually make sure that whether it's the property itself or the LLC, there's a transfer into the trust. Otherwise, you have a very, very expensive yet useless group of papers, right? And all of these things do not in any fashion, mitigate or eliminate still the need for insurance, right? So I think that you should still have insurance for the property, and the individual should have a healthy umbrella policy as well. I'm a big believer in both, belts and suspenders to keep one's pants up, right? So, making sure that there is sufficient insurance, that there is sufficient, estate planning and siloing of assets, and that you continue that throughout. So if you enter into a property management agreement or directly into a lease agreement, that you do so in the right names of the right parties, right? So if you follow what I have said, so you've got an LLC that owns the property that is owned by a trust and then there's a trustee. When you sign those leases or that property management agreement, it needs to be in the name of the LLC, signed by the trust and the trustee on behalf of the trust. Otherwise, you are defeating the purpose of creating all of those levels of protection. So that's true in a property management agreement or if you are directly leasing.
Very good. Well, I'm sure that the folks that are watching may have more questions than I asked you this morning. How would somebody get a hold of you? What's the best way to contact you?
So you can reach me by email. My email address is agordon, Gordon, at gordonlawlv.com. You can reach me by telephone, 702-527-5557. I'm on social media in whatever variations that have the words Gordon and law together. But typically email or telephone is the best way of reaching me. I would also invite people to take a look at my website. I post blogs on a very regular basis that can provide additional information, both specifically with estate planning, but also more broadly within, business creation and operations.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate your time. I'm sure people will have lots of questions and got already some great answers. So thank you so much.
I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.